Uncertainty takes the wind out of everything. Box it, lock the box, put a big fat word failure on it. Then when you get a chance and an opportunity, take an opportunity.
Good morning everybody, my name is Benedetto and I'm delighted to welcome you to the very first LOFTCAST. The LOFTCAST is a new series brought to you by Glasgow-based design and branding agency, The LOFT. This video and audio podcast shall bring you insights from a collection of high impact, transformative and radical thinking individuals who have been able to create positive change with what they do. Today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome our very first guest, Dr Iain MacRitchie, a man who definitely lives up to the term high impact. Iain has had an incredibly successful career spanning 3 decades. In that time, he has led 3 business startups and advised over 100 companies, acting as an executive chairman or CEO for 18 of those companies. He has done this nationally and in the United States, Far East and mainland Europe. Throughout that time, he's delivered over £500 million worth of value to shareholders, and he averages out an incredible 6-fold return on profits for the companies he works with. His work has spanned many different sectors, including technology, retail, healthcare, manufacturing, and many others. Indeed, Iain is a leader, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. In 2006, he set up the charitable foundation and has now devoted 5 years as a full-time volunteer to establish the transformational MCR Pathways Programme nationally. MCR is now supporting over 2,000 disadvantaged young people each week, with a plan to reach 5,000 and take the model internationally thereafter. Like everything that Iain does, it's a job which he's carried out with remarkable success. He's been recognised by the Prime Minister with a UK Point of Lights Award, was the recipient of Glasgow's St Mungo Medal, and recently named by AACSB International, the world's largest business education alliance, as one of the 2019 class of influential leaders worldwide. Today, he's going to begin this series by talking to us about realising potential despite circumstance. Iain, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start by telling us a little bit more about MCR Pathways.
Well, MCR Pathways just epitomises realising potential despite circumstances, but it's a thing that really matters because it's young people that are disadvantaged through no fault of their own that just find circumstances compress and just make sure that they can't achieve what they're capable of achieving. MCR Pathways changes that because it's transformational, it works in education, and what we believe is education outcomes really do dictate job choices and ultimately life chances. And what we do is we support those young people through the education system just to make sure that their talent and their potential is what defines them and absolutely not their circumstances. So it started 12 years ago. We've grown it relationship by relationship to now, as you say, 2,000 young people, but that's just the beginning.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit more, what made you've had an incredible career, as obviously we've just mentioned, and it spans both commercial and philanthropic work. What was the rationale behind the transition? What made you want to make the change?
Well, think like us all, it's a journey. It's a journey. You start off with perhaps an idea. So I was fortunate. So my first business venture straight out of university went really well, went exceptionally well. It was a small local Scottish company that went international. And it went international on the back of an idea. And it was quite a naive idea that I had, that something could be better than it was, could actually take on the competition. So it was naivety from a point of not really understanding scale, because I was young, but just thinking, this can work. Why can't it work? Let's just keep doing it until we see what the limit of it is. And in that case, that company went international. So it went from Scotland to 13 different countries and, a whole story in itself. But that gave me financial choice. And financial choice because it was acquired. So it was bought over by a PLC at that point. And I had a decision to make. Did I want to pursue just the corporate career, or did I want to do something on my own? So process of elimination is the answer to your question of, how do we find what we're capable of? Well, we only really find what we're capable of by being right on the edges of what's possible, right on the edges of your comfort zone. So I took a choice, definitely not going to pursue a corporate career. I'm going to pursue my own thing. Then you start to ask the question, what actually satisfies you? What gives you the pleasure? And for me, it was about achieving a goal. But once you achieve the goal, that pleasure goes. So I was continually restless, if you like, to try and find out what could the goal be, what could that boundary be. And eventually I settled on the things that gave me the most amount of satisfaction, which was just seeing things flourish. And things are never really what it's about, because every business isn't a thing. Every business is a series of people, series of individuals, teams, and that's really what set me on the path. So I enjoyed it. I got satisfaction out of it. So if I'm being very direct, it wasn't about being a philanthropic type interest, or it was about satisfaction. What gave me that pleasure? And certainly achieving goals did, but then it became a little bit of a deeper situation because they just weren't enough. Making money wasn't enough. You had to then have something more than that you're making a difference. And it sounds a bit sophisticated, but I mean a difference to individuals, a collection of individuals, a lot of individuals, and hey, maybe I could make a difference to, a bigger place, maybe make a difference to a country, maybe I can make a difference to the world. Again, it sounds as if it's aspirational, but that's what it is. It's just, I don't know my boundaries because I've not reached them yet.
That's an amazing way of looking at it. I have to, it's amazing what you just said there, and what's really interesting is when we discussed the series, if you like, the LOFTCAST series, we were chatting a little bit about high impact and people that make profound amount of change in usually quite short periods of time. And it was yourself that came up with, you were obviously massively excited about realising potential and this idea of that circumstance should not be a boundary. What is it, and you've touched on it a little bit there with what you've just said, but what is it about realising potential that gets you so excited? What's the reason behind it?
I put it on a scale for people to better understand, on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, I respect the fact you must have choice. So my first bit of advice for any budding entrepreneur is get choice. Choice is about money. It's about achievement. It's about relationships. And if you have choice of what you can spend your time on, that is a massive, massive blessing. That's a first milestone. So big advice to entrepreneurs. Get yourself into that position of choice that you can then not be pushed or led or let circumstances dictate you, but actually start to think, what can I possibly do? So answer of scale of 1 to 10, what do I enjoy doing? Achieving a goal, 1 or 2. But a goal doesn't last once you've achieved it. It's done, it's past, it's history. So then you say, okay, what matters? What matters is whatever you do sustains. So it keeps going. And actually, what I found in business, so my choice at my first part of the career was I'm going to go into other businesses. I'm going to start up a couple. So I sort of concluded I quite like variety because my first role gave me variety. So I thought I quite like variety. And again, nobody tells you what to do. You have to experience it. And I probably know from my second job didn't give me variety. And I thought, I'm not working in a PLC. It's so restrictive. It just is going to kill any creative thoughts I've got. I'm going to do my own thing, variety of things, and then you very quickly start to look at what is change about, because when you go into an organisation, they want it to be better. They don't want it to be the same, and I think that's indicative of life. Life doesn't stand still. People don't stand still. We grow old, we have different experiences. So you then take the next step to say it's about change. Ideally positive change, because you don't want to destroy something or make it worse. It's positive change. So it's a logical sequence. What is change? Well, change is, there's no point in doing it if it then reverts back. So I'd go into a business, I'd sort it out, and I made the mistakes. I am world class at making mistakes. I'm absolute world class at knowing what doesn't work. In fact, I'm world class on failure, I think is the best way to describe it. And I'll touch on failure later and what that means. But you do it in step by step. So change, positive, got to sustain. First business I get involved in to sort it out, I did it by strength of will and personality. Worked. Then it didn't. It fell back. As soon as I went away, as soon as I took my foot off the gas, it fell back. You then say, what's the point in change unless it sustains and actually then goes on? So how do you do that? Well, you have to persuade people, because you can't force things through by strength of will or personality. Even if it's positive, you can't force it through. You have to persuade. Soon as you take that step, and again, huge tip to entrepreneurs, some of them will do it naturally. Some might be very ideas focused and in their own heads. Success is down to persuasion. Persuading others, staff members, team members, investors, whoever else, that the change is the right thing to do and it's something that they should do. Because again, I think I can start something, I can sustain nothing. And that's, just a fact of a matter in my experience. I would never have thought that when I was 20, 25, probably even 30. When I started to lose my hair in my 30s, then I really did have to accept changes happening irrespective of whether I like it or not. Persuasion is the thing. That step then, you come out of your own head and start to think about, what are other people thinking? What are other people doing? How can I persuade them to take on the right things, to take the right decisions? The next logical step is, well, I need to then help them take the right decisions. I need to then train them. I need to share my experiences. I need to let them experience the stuff that I know works. And that's how it evolves. So it evolves from I start, we sustain. It then evolves into, how do I understand people? How can I work with people? How can I really get into their heads to try and persuade them that this is the better version of the future that really means something to them and it'll impact them. So for me, it's been evolutionary. But ultimately, success, and this is the big challenge I had in a business sense, is success is really judged 2 years after you've left. That is really, really, really hard. And ultimately, success is judged as whether the team take it on further. And again, in my experience, the first half of my career definitely did not hit that standard at all. There was success, companies made money, teams did their things, but did they really move on to the next level? 1 or 2 of them did, but not as many as I would like. Second half of my career, definitely different, because I was very focused on, actually, these things need to sustain. They need to go beyond me. It needs to be much, much, much better. After I've left, in fact, not quite celebrating the fact that I do leave, but after I leave, it needs to be better. And in 3, 4, 5 years' time, I want it to be 10, 100,000 times better. That for me is success, because I know I've just contributed to it. But it's like any one individual cannot do everything. That's the challenge and mistakes I see some entrepreneurs making, is it becomes about them. It's not about them. It's about the people that you need to persuade to take that organisation on.
It's interesting. One of the things, we've had some discussions in the past, and you've already touched on it, about a relationship with failure. We talked about empowering the people, essentially putting the succession in place for people to take on the work and continue the growth of the organisations that you've been a part of. How important is it to that everybody feels comfortable with failure? And it seems that that's what's the relationship? Do you put people in the situation where it's a safe place to fail, or do you just let them carry on and see how they get on?
Failure, we could speak all day about failure, because failure, when we all talk about it academically, we accept the fact you don't learn unless you failed. So we accept that academically. Nobody, I would challenge, accepts that personally. People do not. Human nature, the environment, social media, press, culture, whatever it is, does not accept failure. So that's a contradiction in terms. It's a magnificent contradiction. What you have to do, in my experience, my opinion, is try and reconcile the two of them. So I'll tell you how I treat failure. I treat failure as, that's the place I'm going to learn. I don't want to die in the process. I don't want to bust a business in the process. I don't want to break a team in the process. But we need to reconcile the two. Because unless you fail, I'd say the best place to learn, and it's universal. I used to think maybe it doesn't happen in America because they've got a more positive culture, or maybe it happens a lot in the UK. And then when you go around the world, you realise actually it's exactly the same. It's just we interpret it maybe slightly different ways. So failure for me is, how do you personally reconcile it? And I'll give you a big tip I do, and it might sound a little bit of, about how your mindset and how you approach, and it is. You need to look into failure. So if I start a project, start a business, I cover off the worst case. What's the worst case in this situation? So the worst case, it's bust. Or the worst case, I get rejected. In the current, what I'm doing with MCR Pathways is far more important than what I've ever done in business, as I'll touch on. So I cover off the worst case. I'm going to get rejected. This isn't going to work. Something's going to go spectacularly wrong. I think about it. I dwell on it, I cover off what exactly would I do in that situation. And then I box it off, because in my head, I've covered the worst case scenario. What is it? I've covered it. I've tried to think about how I'd react and respond. It's then boxed. I will not revisit that box. I've thought about it. I'm confident in it. I'll then look at how do I avoid it. But that mental process I find is freedom. What I see in individuals that get captured by the sense and fear of failure is it's fear of the unknown. It's not actually fear of failure in itself. It's just unknown, out of control, what's going to happen. I'm completely out of control. I'm impotent. I cannot do anything. If you've considered what that scenario is, but then don't dwell on it, because you get what you imagine you'll get. I'm a passionate advocate of that. So you box it, you lock it, you sit it there, you maybe occasionally look at it, you never go back into it, but you know what's in it. So what do I fear? Nothing, because it's certain. The other truth of the matter is, you only fail when you give up. It's extraordinary how many people don't know that. So therefore, in my head, I know what it looks like. I'm never going to give up, so I'm never going to fail. And that is the mental process that I think we have to take ourselves through. And actually, when you put it back even in a UK sense, in a Scottish sense, because we, on occasions, and I do think it's the truth of the matter, can really dwell too much on the negative, and therefore, what do we get? You know, again, you get, you know, it's like, I've got a picture, I actually gave it to my son, but I've got a picture of, you know, two wolves. You know, one is really aggressive and one is the one you want to be with. You know, wolves are it literally is a painted picture. You get the one you feed. So if I feed the positive one, if I feed the one that's going to take me places, then that's what I'm going to get. If I feed the negativity and I feed failure and I feed all the things, that's what comes into my future. There's no question of that. That's the case in my experience. And my experience, as you know, is dropping into organisations that really are broken. They're broken, they're not performing as they should be, and it can be two extremes. It can be they're not really performing as they should be, it could and should be better, and investors are disappointed, management's disappointed, service is not good. That's one end. The other end of the extreme is it's really in trouble. You know, it's terminal. And the situation in those is identical in my experience. It's how people think. Sure, there's stuff that needs to be sorted financially, systemically, all the bits. But fundamentally what you're left with is how people think. So for me, failure, 2 or 3 steps, you get freedom. Not freedom from it, because the box still sits there, but actually you're then thinking about how to avoid that, but you're also thinking about, okay, how can I look beyond it? What is the best version of this? What is success? How is success defined? And keep going into that future, but then bring it back to where we are now. And then you just focus on the steps in between the two. And the steps in between the two is never a straight line. You know, it's always, as you know, it's a little bit weavy, but keep focused on that future. And there's magnificent techniques that you can keep focused on the future and make sure that you duck and dive your way through to what you deem to be success. Now that's business. If I lift that into what really matters, which is young people that really have no choice in the matter, circumstances means they won't, and it really does mean they won't. And most disadvantaged young people just now that are trapped by their circumstances, by who they're taking, I mean, it literally is randomly, who do they leave the hospital with when they're born can dictate their lifetime. We are going to change that. There's no question we're going to change that, because those young people are as talented. Because I'm being honest, I did have a prejudice thinking, well, maybe they're not, you know, maybe there's choices being made there that they don't realise, because hey, I did, and everybody thinks that. If I was, why can't they? But the reality is circumstances, deprivation, poverty really dictates. It is a blight, it is a disease, it's things that must be taken care of, because those are individuals, talent, potential, capability that has got zero chance. We will change it, because we're never going to let those circumstances dictate or define those young people, and that's why we do what we do. So I'm taking what I've done in business, which, as you say, you know, for me has been relatively successful. Could it have been better? No question. Did I make mistakes? A spectacular number of them. Have I got success out of everyone? Yes. Was I satisfied? No. Did it ultimately give me a lot of satisfaction, even big numbers and international? No. When I lift it into this world, this is a completely different challenge. This is the greatest challenge I've ever faced, of those skills of realising potential despite circumstances are exactly the same when we move it into the world I'm now working in. It just matters more because it's lives we're talking about and it's lifetimes we're talking about, not just a little bit of a snapshot. So techniques are the same, they matter more, and it really is about what's the capability of that young person and making sure that they know and understand that. Not, I can't tell them, they have to be able to know. So the persuasion thing comes into play again. How can we help that young person to find, grow and use their talent? And how can we do it in the education system? Because whether I like it or not doesn't matter, but education dictates the job choices that you get, and that dictates the life chances that you have. So that's really the chemistry of this.
Yeah. Ian, it sounds like when you discussed, when you spoke about failure there, it sounds like you've cultivated a sort of extraordinary mindset, and you'd mentioned there was like 2 or 3 little techniques that you've used to keep yourself focused on the sort of the wider vision, the bigger goal, or something that's bigger than a goal actually. Do you mind sharing with us just a couple of the techniques that you've used to help box away failure and allow you to push forward into what is the best version of what something can be?
Yeah, well, I think, as I've said, in human nature, it is unknown that really makes us, we can't do. We can't be motivated when there's a fear of unknown or things are uncertain. Uncertainty takes the wind out of everything, absolute everything. And I would say that in individuals, collections of individuals, companies, even although there's really good and motivated people in there, uncertainty is absolutely killer. So first thing in failure is take away the uncertainty as best you can. And that's about thinking about it. So that is about, so before I put the failure in the box, I really think it through. And that does mean spend the time. It means spend the time on your own. And on occasions it means spend the time with your inner team to say, because what you don't want to do is talk about it really broadly, because everyone then starts to think about, oh my goodness, and what you get, what you imagine you get, you will often get. So take it in a small, tight team. Let's just define what are we going to do when it does go wrong, when things go spectacularly wrong. In a business sense, it's easy. When it's bust. When it's busts, people lose money. What are we actually going to do in that situation, collectively and individually? So you take away uncertainty. Failure can't go alongside uncertainty. Take away the uncertainty. Understand what the failure looks like, scope it out, then box it. Box it, lock the box. Put a big fat word failure on it and leave the key in, but leave it there and push it further away from you as physically possible. That's a thought process. The second thought process then is you have to look at what is the best version of this. What's the absolute best version? So when I work with a young person, I'm talking to them. More importantly, I'm listening to them. I'm looking for what could be that spark. I'm looking for things, because the first thing you look for is something that motivates somebody. And this is where there's a beautiful 3-step process that I think you can get the best out of every organisation as well as individual. First thing is motivation. Now, we are never going to get motivated by somebody beating you up. Never. You might to run away, but it can only be a positive thing. So, positive motivation, and I think there's a spark in everybody when they see they can do something, or when they see, I could maybe do that in the future, or even I could do that now. So first base is motivation. So I've boxed my failure, I need to get to the motivation point. Motivation does not last. So even if I get it, I'm motivated, but I'm not motivated all the time. Nobody is. So even your most energetic person, if they're honest, will tell you the times that they're not, either physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it goes. Now you might be able to grab it back quickly and go, but how do you grab it back? The next word is commitment. You grab it back by being committed to something, committed to that better version of the future, or committed as in we are to say, we ain't giving up on those young people, because if we do, circumstances will determine them, circumstances will crush them, circumstances will make sure. The way they get out of it is by being committed to that best version of themselves. What could you be? What might you be? and then let the motivation wash through that. But when the motivation dies, the commitment is what keeps you looking forward. You might feel bad in that moment, but that commitment will keep you going forward. And it's then all about putting colour to that version. What is the best version of this organisation? What's the best version of this individual's future? But then you need the last part of the equation, which is resilience, because irrespective, and I think you could line up anybody for these films, and you can line up the guys that are far more successful than I have, and if you really poke them, so this is challenging your interview skills, if you really, really, really poke them, nobody has been 100% successful 100% of the time. Nobody. Irrespective of whether they're a billionaire or they've got nothing. They have not been. They've faced into moments that it's gone wrong. And on occasions, in the world I've worked in, it's gone spectacularly wrong. In fact, you couldn't make up the stories. You know, I probably got a best one. I do share this one of, you know, sitting in the, I mean, it was wall-to-wall entertaining, but it's sitting in the Savoy Hotel in London, an awards ceremony, you know, all the great and the good there, 4, you know, prestigious awards. I was nominated for 2 actually, thought there's zero chance I'll get anywhere close to this. And it was for turning things round. It was for actually sorting out. So this was quite a big organisation and a big deal. Sitting there and enjoying myself, probably a little bit too much, thinking, well, it's just a good night out. You know, it's fabulous to be nominated. You know, it's a little Scottish boy in amongst all those international jet setters. But my phone was going. And my phone was going because I'd chosen to do something else. I'd chosen to go into an organisation that was in real trouble, because that's what I did. And the phone was going, literally on the night, the phone was going saying, this is in deep trouble. You know, this is now, we've discovered an accounting issue, all the stuff you get when you go into something. And it was a case of, this thing does not have any money. And you begin to get into, it can't legally trade, blah, blah, blah. So I'm enjoying myself and then not, and thinking, well, I'm just going to go for it anyway. And of course, what happens? I won 2 of the 4 awards. I'm up on stage, and then I'm thinking, this is going to be the best entertainment for the press that there's ever been, of the UK's turnaround professional of the year. And then at the same instant, the next thing he goes into is bust, and absolutely catastrophic across, because it was actually a software organisation. It was North Sea Oil and Gas, actually. It was doing a lot of exploration type work, a lot of drilling sites, not just in the north east, but also around the world, was based in this company's software. And if it had gone bust, it'd have been, we might have shut down the oil industry for maybe half an hour. It would have been much longer. So that is when you go, okay, how on earth, I am motivated, I am committed, but it's dealing with that, it's dealing with resilience. Resilience is the thing. You know, I see it in our young people, and actually, ironically, I see more resilience in them than I have seen anywhere else, because they've had to deal with stuff. They've had to deal with stuff that you couldn't make up, actually. The bit that we want to connect then is that motivation commitment. What I see in others is no resilience, but they've got maybe a little motivation, but then they have a cloudy vision of what the future might look like, and it's a wee bit too short term, and that all just dies a death. Connect all 3, having boxed away what failure means to you. That is the chemistry of change. That's the chemistry of life, I believe. That's the chemistry of change in any situation, of realising potential despite circumstances, is connect up MCR. So, you know, MCR is not mine. MCR is and should be everybody's set of values, set of things that drives them forward. So again, massive bit of advice I would give to any business, any individual, any entrepreneur, any manager. Get your own version of MCR, apply it, go play with it, add to it, do whatever you like with it, but use it. It will propel you. It will propel you into 3 different things, and that will be all definitions of success, whatever your definition of success is.
So the secret sauce is resilience.
It is. I mean,
to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, it's all 3. I mean, if you combine that motivation, commitment, resilience. But again, look in a mirror. I mean, sometimes, I'm not saying I like to do that actually, maybe a sideways glance, but you know, look at yourself. You know, because another thing that, you know, I would say, big bit of advice, and again, I'm sort of reflecting at the moment because what we do matters. So if I'm reflecting, is the sort of area I'm reflecting much more on what I'm doing just now with the young people and how to really scale it, because everyone said it can't be done. You can't have, because the same thing as failure. We say one thing, but we do another. It's the same thing with relationships. We say one thing, relationships are really important, to everyone's development, to education, to social work, to society. But yet we don't practice it at scale. We rely on individuals to go the extra mile. We don't give people the time because we can't afford to be able to help and support in the way. So we are trying to bridge, and that's another key word for me personally, is bridge what should happen with what actually happens. So people said we can't do what we do, it'll never be successful. You're trying to give, because the way MCR Pathways works is we match a young person in school. So we put a member of staff in the school, they have a relationship with young people as well, they work with them in first and second year when they come up from primary school. They then get matched with a mentor. And it's a volunteer mentor, because again it's very important, who's there for no other reason than they care, and it's relationship based. It's not about actually advice or about the adult perspective or about, I'm going to tell you about the world, because they're not interested, nor would I be. This is about spending time. This is human. It's about listening. It's letting that young person talk. It's about letting that young person express what they feel, letting that young person at that age, 13, 14, 15, it is a priceless thing. If I had the last pound in your pocket, I'd spend it on a 13-year-old. Doesn't mean every other age isn't important, it is, but I'd spend the time and the last bit of resource I have on that 13-year-old. And it would just be time. It'd be relationship based. It is ridiculously effective with that young person, which said to me when I started to reflect, actually relationships in the moment are really, really critical, really important. That's the mistakes I've made in the past because I've been too thinking about the future and not necessarily living in the moment. So you're always restless. You're like, yeah, great job. What's next? Yeah, next, push it on. And you gradually start living your life in the future. And that's not a good place to be. You need to be able to rotate. So the other key thing, everything's in threes, as you know with me, but the other key thing we have to do as a country, as individuals, is be in the future as to what do we want it to be? What do we want inclusion to be? What do we want society to be? But then quickly come back to the present and say, right, what is it? Let's be real. Let's be realistic. Let's be open. This applies in a business as much as it does society. But then you've got two things. You've got a vision and you've got reality. It's what do we do in between the two? Take the steps. Do stuff, make stuff happen towards that version of it. If we combine all three things, then we're in good shape. If we're too much into the vision, then we're going to really upset everybody because it's like it's a waste of time talking about stuff that isn't real. If we're locked into today, nothing changes. And if we just get process driven, then we lose what really matters, which is relationships. So I think with what we are doing, because if I put the numbers in perspective, if you are mentored as an MCR young person at the moment, before we started, 48.8% of young people progressed to university, college or employment of our most disadvantaged, particularly those in the care system. So those in the care system have got social work involvement. If you're mentored in the MCR programme, that moves from 48.8%. We have a 3-year average in one of the most challenged cities in the country of 83% are progressing to university, college or employment. It's ridiculously effective, but at its heart is simplicity. A lot of adult organisation, but it's just relationship-based practice at scale. A one-to-one support mechanism in the system. Not outside it, not floating about, but actually in the system is what is transformational. You take some of those principles, and again to the audience, take some of those principles of actually let's really spend the time with those that need it, because when you do, and this is the big lesson I've got in the second half of my career relative to the first half, because the first half of my career was really all about doing maybe the conventional things. You'd go into a failing organisation and you would take out people. So you'd say very quickly, that's someone for the future, that's not someone for the future, and there's maybe a bit in between the two. So you would be actually encouraged to cut costs because you had to, but you would end up doing it in a very arbitrary fashion. I no longer do that. So my team breaks the convention, and I'd say my best corporate transformations have been in the main using the exact same team that all got into the difficulty in the first place. By applying the same thing that I'm doing now in a much, much, much more meaningful way is, listen, ask the questions. The gap might just be a tiny cog actually, not a big cog. It might just be a tiny cog that connects up everything that works. There needs to be somebody leading it. There needs to be somebody driving it. But if you share the techniques I've just said, believe me, it's transformational for an organisation, and absolutely, most importantly, transformational for a young person. Give them that motivation, commitment, resilience, their version of it, not yours, and keep them focused on best version of you, realistically where we are, and let's take the steps in between and we will help you. That is a seed of sustainable change, which for me, change motivates me, sustainable change motivates me to a factor of 10. And I know really sustainability means it needs to be without me, because it cannot be, it has to be owned by everyone bar you.
And the ripple effect?
Ripple effect is incredible. I mean, what we are doing with young people, example being last week at a wedding with one of our first mentees who's got married. Actually, he's now a mentor, and his wife is a mentor as well. So, if I look at this as an example of the ripple effect. So Liam, good friend, when he first came to secondary school, one of the secondary schools in which we were working in the East End of Glasgow, he was, as he shares, 4 years behind in his learning. He had 13 different homes. The family was in crisis, and again, really challenging times. Now, it's very straightforward, and this is something I find surprising sometimes. It's very straightforward. If I have a personal problem, of which I think everyone does time to time, I certainly do, then it affects your ability to concentrate. Now, if you put that in a young person's head, if you've got such a degree of instability at home, then how can we expect those young people to concentrate in class? And we have a linear education system, and that's just the way it is. It's the way it's designed. So how can we expect them to concentrate? Of course they can't concentrate. And Liam was a classic example. He had so much disruption, he couldn't concentrate. He's 4 years behind. His little sister in primary school was doing his homework. Now, if I take it on, as I said, he went through, we supported him, we gave him that one-to-one, we also gave him other external, sort of what we call talent tasters, to find that motivation in him, that little spark. And if I bring it right up to date, he went to college, he got into university, got his degree, got his job, and is immense. Now, the ripple effect of that is him, his family, his extended family, and I would say now the person he's mentoring, because he's mentored a young person, his wife is now mentoring. It's the mentoring phenomena is what will actually change the country. And I have no doubt in my head, because I can see it. I can see it in individuals. And all we need to do is reach more individuals. And the more individuals we reach, and the more that others allow us to reach, because there's barriers to what we do, there's systems, there's things we need to work through. There's all the adult stuff we need to get to. Once we get through the adult stuff, this matters. And Liam right now is a graduate holding down a professional job, just married and just bought his house. In fact, he's way ahead of where I was if I look at his comparable age. So, and that is what, and how a generation will change. It's not just about saying it and shouting it or doing the politician part. It's about the individuals and giving them the way and the choice and the support to be able to do it. Same thing applies in organisations. That's why this theme for me is a theme of my life actually now, of just realising potential gives you immense satisfaction. The circumstances, despite the circumstances, to an even greater extent. The gate of the challenge, I have now the choice, and I respect the fact that I have the financial choice and have the time choice, because I can take 5 years out of my life and volunteer to make this happen, because it's so important. There's nothing there's nothing better I can do at all in any way, shape or form. So I respect if I can choose to do those things, but that process of realising potential despite circumstances is an immensely satisfying thing. And if I can show in a tiny way a precedent for others to say, I'm going to try that technique. See that nutter I saw on film? I'm going to try that technique. I'm going to try my own version of motivation, commitment, resilience. I'm going to have my little triangle of what could be, what is, and what's a bit in between the two. I'm going to try all that. I'm going to box off my failure, stick it in. I'm going to look at it. I'm really going to look at it. I'm going to stick it in a box, lock it, and not go back to it because it's not uncertain. It's clear. I know what it is. Freedom. Then I'm going to test myself because the other thing that I do think is the last part of the equation, and it goes in cycle. Life's a cycle, state the bleeding obvious, but it's a cycle. We all go in cycles within the cycles. And I think, you need to sort of commit, and it's hard, commit to test yourself. Because again, if I know I can't really fail until I give up, then test yourself. How do you know what you're capable of? That's the kind of thing we say to our young people of just, because unfortunately they're conditioned to think they're incapable. So they're conditioned by their circumstances to say, you can't, it's not for you, you shouldn't participate, you've not got it. And then the things that, I remember my teacher telling me I would never get to university. I remember my teacher telling me I was a waster. Chemistry teacher, I wouldn't name him. Things that were said, I know, because I subsequently spoke to him, I've said, I was just in jest. Doesn't matter. It's what I heard. I remember when I went to I played professional football for a while, and to my manager to say, look, I've got a university offer, but I really want to play football. And of course, what he's telling me is the right thing is go to university. What I hear is I'm crap at football. So it's like a young mind takes things. We all take things in, but at the end of the day, that conditioning will either make you very difficult or not receptive to trying testing yourself out. But everybody should, because you don't know what you're capable of until you're on the edge of it. That ain't comfortable. But that's something you should practice every day. Put yourself in, and it's not big highbrow techniques. It's just take yourself out your habit, because we all love habits. Humans love habits, but just break the habit occasionally. I'll do ridiculously stupid things of, move about, work in a different location, or just to break the habit, break the brain, walk back home in a different way, or try something else. All to keep conditioning your brain away from habit, structure, of just try. And then when you get a chance and an opportunity, take an opportunity, consider it, but take it if it's going to test you and stretch you.
What was I going to say? I'd planned to ask you the question about advice you would give to your 25-year-old self, but I think you've covered actually quite a lot of that throughout the last...
Yeah, I'm sort of rotating around ages, but yeah.
So I'm going to flip on its head a little bit and ask you about the next 20 years. I think let's start with MCR Pathways, and I know what you're going to say here, but I quite like this idea that the young people that's obviously being mentored are so resilient. Like for them, if they can get through sort of their current difficulties, the sky really is the limit, because there's a level of strength there that maybe doesn't exist with others because they have been tested at such a young age. So I think you probably agree with that. But yeah, just take us through the future of us for MCR Pathways and then yourself.
Well, MCR Pathways and me are sort of, I guess, intertwined because the theme is definitely the same. I mean, it is, I'm committed for as long as I'm on this planet, to be driven by the realising potential despite circumstances. I'll apply that in different ways because I think it applies universally. MCR Pathways is really straightforward. I want every single young person that is anywhere close to the care system, had any form of social work involvement, to have this as a right. Have one-to-one support through education, embodied, based, enshrined in policy, but the practice of it to be so transformational as we see at the moment, 2,000 young people, but the model works for the model to be applied in every Western economy and an equivalent of it wherever else it needs to go. So for me, if you have got circumstances that you end up being as a young person through no fault of your own, that is supported and taken care of on a relationship basis. It cannot become. So for me, I want MCR Pathways everywhere. It needs to be in the education system. So that's pretty straightforward really, because it's just about scaling it now with integrity, at least in my head. I'm sure the team will agree, slightly disagree with that. There's loads of stuff to do. But I've seen it, I see it, and I can see the way that we can actually do it. So, we'll keep driving forward in that. For me personally, I guess you start to think about, what change do you want to see, for your kids? It almost sounds a little bit morbid. It's not, because I've always done this to say, what do you want to achieve with your lifetime? What do you want to actually contribute? Because again, make no mistake, contribution is what drives me, but actually it's what gives me the greatest degree of satisfaction. It's not because it's for the greater good, it's actually what I enjoy doing. And again, big bit of advice for everybody, do what you enjoy doing. You've got to get some kind of enjoyment out of it. If it's too much of an obligation, you'll never succeed. I think that's just a rule. I've seen it across the board. So I enjoy this. I love this. It's just fabulous. I think I want to share all these techniques wherever they could apply. So I think there's institutions. I think there's organizations. I think there's countries. I think there's a ripe market, let's call it, or opportunity for these techniques to be applied. So education for our most disadvantaged, I want to see it universal. I want to see it wherever it needs to be, with integrity, no question. And then I want those techniques, if I could speak English, shared with other areas. I think the NHS in the UK, has a huge need to be and apply some of the techniques that I'm talking about. It is in pockets, because the usual thing, everyone criticises the whole, but actually it's not the case, because the same in education. Some of the education is magnificent. Some of the schools and head teachers they're doing is fabulous. I would have a massive call out for the director of Glasgow's education, Maureen McKenna, I'll name her, chief exec of Glasgow City Council, Anne-Marie O'Donnell. These guys do phenomenal jobs in massively challenging circumstances. So there's huge pockets. I want to go to the pockets that resist. I want to go to the pockets that don't change. I want to go to the pockets that cause issues. And if I can't go there directly, I want to share the advice and the techniques to be able to change stuff sustainably for the better and for the greater good of everybody concerned. Dead easy.
I think that's a good place to leave it, actually. I think, firstly, I'd like to thank yourself for giving us some just incredible insights, ideas and lessons, and sharing your experiences with us. And also this pilot version of the LOFTCAST. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Alan from Custom Flavour for all his wonderful work behind the scenes, and I'd like to thank Dana from the MCR Pathways team. We will be back in a month's time with another LOFTCAST. Until then, thank you very much. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks.